You're listening to a Very Spatial Podcast, episode 780, March 3rd, 2026.
Hello and welcome to a VerySpatial Podcast. I'm Jesse.
I'm Sue.
I'm Barb.
And this is Frank.
And this week we're going to talk about some terrestrial mapping stuff that was all the news at GeoWeek. Well, not all the news, but a lot of the news at GeoWeek this week. But first, of course, we have newses, which begins with Google Maps being granted access to South Korea's map data. This is the high resolution stuff that South Korea has, that kind of like with China, where they're very territorial with high accuracy data sets and are like, okay, if you're going to collect high resolution data, you've got to let us know about it and we can say yes or no, but we'll give you access to lower resolution. That's what everybody's generally had access to. So now Google's going to get access to South Korea's high resolution data set. And this is important because, of course, if you are using Google Maps for transportation or for just trying to get around and you're not from South Korea, and so you're not connected to South Korea's data sets, you will now be able to do that. And I will say from our time in Japan, where Google Maps is invaluable for getting everything from train times to from point A to point B on public transportation, it's just really nice to have that. So it's going to be interesting to see how this changes the landscape of data usage, or more importantly, map app usage in South Korea going forward.
So they do have some restrictions on it too, because for, I think, what did they say, over 2 decades, they've kind of resisted this. And what it boiled down to is they didn't want to export their high-res data to any overseas servers. So by allowing Google to have it, though, Google has to abide by some restrictions, including blurring sensitive sites, which is done in other places, but interestingly, disallowing lat long on South Korean territory. So you can get around with your directions and stuff like that, but you won't see the lat long showing. Apparently, I haven't tested it, but so they've not 100% said you do what you want, but still, for everyday uses, that's not really going to keep anybody.
I think this demonstrates one of the skills that you need as a geospatial company and geospatial professionals, in that we do work a lot of times with shared data. That, Google's built up a lot of trust between, countries and places that they work with. And as Sue pointed out, it did take almost, 2 decades to have them change their minds about this stance. So I think that says a lot about the work that Google's doing, Google Maps around the world.
I think the other question is, or did Google finally concede to South Korea's expectations? True. So, some of it might be South Korea, some of it might be Google just saying, we'll let it go if we can get access to this data and be able to collect things. So,
or did the public put so much push on both of them that they gave in?
Next up, the European Space Agency is preparing to launch the Celeste LEO-PNT, Low Earth Orbit Precision Navigation and Time System. And so this is going to be an in-orbit demonstration mission that's going to launch on March 24th to show how the system is going to work. It's going to launch from New Zealand, but really it's just key that, after we've seen various PNT systems, localized PNT systems, be kind of taken off, so ELORAN and things like that being taken offline, the fact that over the last year we've seen systems both coming back online and new systems being prepared as we see more GPS jamming and things like that, is just, interesting to see how that's changing.
Yeah, so what this is essentially going to be a complementary layer to Galileo. That's what they're testing for. So Galileo and systems like that are middle or medium Earth orbit, so MEO systems. And so the idea is to essentially boost what's already, coming out of those satellites, and also enhance them and pick up the slack when there are problems.
And ESA is offering interested third parties from the ESA participating states the opportunity to participate in this experimentation phase. And they have more information available on their open space innovation platform.
They have cool names for their missions: Galileo, Celeste. Other ones I can't think of right now.
But something that makes me smile, because it's also when you see, things in the geospatial world that say not to scale, and you're like, well, obviously, they basically have the satellite system with artist rendering of what it will look like. And you're like, well, sometimes we forget that when we're seeing those images of satellites, that a lot of times it is the artist rendering of what it looks like.
So I will say this is just a large CubeSat, these two that are being used. So not giant satellites. I do. What was the technical thing I was going to say? Oh, the medium versus low. Of course, whenever you're talking about that distance, it's not a huge distance, but it is less impacted by atmospheric and other aspects in terms of getting the signal from the satellite to the sensor. And so just having that little bit closer distance, I'm curious to see what kind of, how that impacts the accuracy between the two systems.
And also, if the tests are successful, like what are they ultimately envisioning for a full Celeste constellation? That will be a question.
Next up, a couple of Esri news items. One, everyone who has been in the Esri world for a while now should gently pour one out for an old friend. ArcMap is officially retired as of March 1st, so a couple of days ago as of this recording. It has officially entered the retirement phase. This should not be a shock to anyone. We've certainly talked about the fact this was coming up for, I don't know, it feels like forever now.
About a decade.
Yeah, it feels for a while. The last version was ArcMap 10.8.2. What does retired mean? It doesn't mean it gets to go off to a beach somewhere and drink Mai Tais. What it means is that basically, if you call Esri and say, I've got a problem, they go, well, that sucks. The first problem you have is you have ArcMap. We don't support that anymore. So you cannot create any tech support cases whatsoever. You do still have online support resources. So in other words, if there are technical articles out there or, forum posts or stuff like that, they're not deleting all that stuff. So you still can get access to that if you insist on running ArcMap, but that's pretty much all you got. There will be no updates or patches, and there is no new environment certifications. What that means is just a fancy way of saying if Windows 12 comes out next year, not that it is, just saying hypothetically if it is, then it will not be figured out whether ArcMap will be running successfully on Windows 12. So ArcMap had a long life cycle. Let's see, 2000
roughly.
Yeah, 2000 or so.
Yeah, so about 26 years.
Yeah, so a quarter century. That is an impressive life cycle for any piece of software.
And we say 10, just to jump into Frank's, we say 10.8, but it started at 8.0.
Yeah.
So it's not like it was a lot of different versions, but there were a lot of course, increments through 8, 9, and 10. But yeah, it's not, there weren't that many different versions.
Yeah, and anyone who has had any experience working with ArcView, ask your parents. Before that, you can run ArcMap for a shockingly long period of time successfully. So it's not like your software won't work necessarily. I don't know if you can license for it. I haven't looked in my Esri to figure that out. But if you have a standalone license, it will probably function. But if you don't have an exit strategy out of ArcMap, you should have gotten one a year ago. You really got to get on that.
You should have had one 3 years ago because it was end of life 2 years ago. This is just the final, we're done. Walking away.
Walking away, turning the lights out, closing the door.
A lot of people love ArcMap. It was never my particular thing. It always worked weird for me. It wasn't what I was into. ArcPro is much more in line with what I think about. But related to that, of course, is ArcGIS Online. February saw a new set of updates, as has happened pretty much every February, March-ish timeframe for a really long time now. There's a whole bunch of new stuff in there. I'll be honest with you. Check the link in the show notes to dig through it all. I only kind of scanned pieces of it, but there's some kind of cool stuff in the mapping piece, I think. The most important one in other retirement news is if you're using Map Viewer Classic, which used to just be Map Viewer, that's now retired. So you'll be moving over to the new Map Viewer. Honestly, it's just better. So
to jump in on that, yes, it is better. And 2, this means that if you have any old story maps that used Map Viewer, those
Classic.
Story maps, classic, those have issues now. So go through your old story maps and check those. Make sure everything's still working. And if not, try to get it moved over if you didn't do it before the end of life.
Yeah, many of us have those floating around that we forget were put up somewhere and people are still accessing. So you might want to, create a catalog to keep track of, where you've shared things and posted them and see if it's still being used and should be updated.
There's a bunch of other really cool things in the map stuff, like you can print now with dynamic layers, which is really nice because that was always annoying if you ever needed to actually print a paper copy of anything. You can do time-based layers. There's a whole visualization tab now that doesn't require you to open the entire map viewer to do things. There's a lot of nice improvements, but it's really no different than any other sort of update to ArcGIS Online, is that they're, constantly rolling in new stuff. So really check out the links in the show notes to figure out all the things you can do.
Yes. Which is a lot, as they do every time in the middle of the semester.
The biggest jump was on the map viewer. That's the biggest part of the show notes. I'm sorry, the biggest part of the update notes, because there's a lot of cool stuff there.
I'm trying to remember, there was something 3D. I just can't remember.
No, photorealistic tiles.
There is that, but because those are Google photorealistic tiles.
Yeah.
Now you can access those in ArcScene or the scene viewer. But the thing that I'm thinking of in 3D is actually, because Frank's
splat
here.
layers.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. I guess we should say that before we go on to the other thing I was going to talk about. But yeah, I mean, that's, I don't know. I haven't done enough. I've used it, but I haven't taken the time to understand
layers.
Yeah.
Like Gaussian splat layers.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about Gaussian splat layers. First of all, it sounds really cool. It's a great Thanksgiving or a holiday with your family. What do? Do Gaussian splat layers. And I go, oh, that sounds impressive. But when you do it, you go, that's really cool. And then you kind of move on to something else. It's just, but it's like, it's neat and it's pretty, but I don't know why it.
So upshot is photogrammetry. Whenever you want to create a 3D model, whether it's from aerial imagery, so top down, or terrestrial levels, this is a way to go to create models that you can put into Scene Viewer and now utilize them. And it's just, how is it different from the traditional photogrammetry? I understand it, but I could not explain it.
Same.
I don't understand it well enough to be confident to talk about it.
To me, it's a little bit like the different types of kriging. Like, I kind of know what they do, but I don't really understand the math. That's
yeah. That's that. Yeah. Okay. But the other 3D thing I was thinking of is QGIS 4.0, which is supposed to come out this month, or was supposed to come out last month, and maybe hasn't.
Yeah, I'm the guy that knows that.
That's why I was like, I don't know if I want to say this right after Frank was talking about ArcGIS Online. But just be aware, apparently one of the big things is going to be more 3D capabilities, and this includes things like point clouds and stuff, which you could bring into before, especially for LiDAR, but it's just better in 4 from what I'm reading. But again, I haven't downloaded it yet, and I don't see it on the download page right now. So
I haven't seen it yet, but I can always tell when there's a change like that occurring because you start to see more of the tutorials being put up places, getting ready.
So we should, and now this is not the long-term release. This is the original initial 4.0 release. The 4.2 release, which is I think October or November, is meant to be the long-term release. So if you are using this for day-to-day work, don't switch over. Maybe have it installed in 2 different locations, but
yeah, it's a great use case for a virtual machine or something like that. See what you can do.
So keep that in mind.
Texas A&M University worked with the U.S. National Science Foundation to create they're just saying it's just a massive data set that is of high resolution Earth systems that's free, that you can use for simulations. And it's giving them new insights into meteorology and also, allowing them, they said, to do models further out from different types of weather events. So in the, nature geoscience, they talk about how it's already helping them to better predict precipitation events and looking at things like atmospheric rivers and tropical cyclones that are affecting, fisheries and other people along the coastlines. So, this is a major accomplishment, as they say. It's really exciting. And it's going to open up the types of research opportunities for people that are going to be able to use what they're calling MESACLIP, is the high resolution data set.
This data set is over 6,000 terabytes. I mean, that's just mind-boggling. But also, we're used to thinking in big data sets like that in our world. So on the one hand, that's mind-boggling. On the other hand, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, what's interesting, they said, is typically if you're working with the Earth's climate or with this type of data, you would be using low resolution for simulations, and this allows you to use high resolutions for something that's extremely complex, like looking at interactions between the ocean, sea ice, and land surface. And I always think dealing with sea ice is just really fascinating because of how complex it is.
Now, keep in mind, whenever they're talking about high resolution, this is high resolution global. So we are still talking about kilometers per pixel. So somewhere between 3 and 25, it seems, depending on which data layer you're looking at. And this is also 4,500 years of simulated data or derived data from various sources. So yeah.
That's past, present, and future. So it's predicted and the past. So you can follow that all along.
Yeah, and they're looking currently for other groups to work with them to come up with other simulations with this data set.
But continuing with NCAR.
Continuing with NCAR, the American Meteorological Society, and I believe AAG as well, have come out in response because NCAR is under threat to be dismantled. NCAR being the National Center for Atmospheric Research. They said they have support from not only the association and researchers, but also from industry. That this is a cross-institutional network that's been built up. They consider it vital to publicly accessible resources for atmospheric scientists, and that it's crucial to what they do for understanding and predicting the weather. So they're asking for comments from the public and others to keep it from being closed
By March 13th. If you are going to comment, make sure to comment before March 13th.
NCAR, if you don't know, falls under the National Science Foundation, and this is a critical piece for university research about the atmosphere and the research around that. You can understand why this administration may not support that as fully as past administrations have, but it does provide us some really important science that is in danger of just being lost. So please, if you're inclined to comment, take the time to do so.
Yeah, and what they said is one of the things that could happen is because UCAR spent so long building up this network, they have research teams, computing systems, and observation infrastructures that no one else, has to use or is available.
And the data they provide is in a wide range of sectors that maybe you don't think about. So partners in agriculture, water utilities, private weather companies, aerospace, and insurance, and financial risk industries, right, and tons more. So it isn't just the science is crucial, but that is not the only use of the data that comes from NCAR.
As mentioned before, the AAG is concerned about this, and so they're having a virtual coffee hour. Yeah, this Friday, March 6th. So if you're hearing this before March 6th, if you're interested, it's going to take place 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time in the U.S. And basically, they'll be talking about the AAG Climate Action Committee will be talking about the proposed restructuring of NCAR. Yeah. And so that might give you some ideas of what you might want to comment on by the 13th if you are contemplating doing so. And then finally this week, it's I don't know. It maybe would have been better as a web corner, but I think it's news given its context of a former Google and many other companies, project manager, engineer, whatever, Sidhu, put together, vibe coded, essentially a virtual globe that is pulling on lots of OSINT or open source information sources and putting it on this thing using various agent-based AI technologies and techniques to basically build this thing up. And so people are calling it an open source Palantir, or I don't know, they're calling lots of different things. Weirdly, it's going to be called WorldView. So I'm curious if it's going to be based on NASA's WorldView code.
NASA's was Whirlwind.
Was it WorldWind?
Yes, WorldView's a satellite.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, but still odd to use that. And also Spatial OS. I'm getting such watchdog vibes from the whole thing. And it, but which, hey, as he pointed out, this stuff in various forms has been around and thought about for a while.
Which, is, of course, is why you can vibe code it, because the code for a lot of these things are out there. But yeah, he's had a couple of videos recently on YouTube to talk about this and the response to him working on it and sharing videos about it. Apparently, he's going to release it sometime later in the year as a tool set, or whatever you want to call it. You can find out from him what he would call it. But it's just interesting because it is building on his time. You can see it, Google Earth and those type of technologies. It's really kind of, if you take Keyhole and advance it 20 years, what it would have been, right?
Yeah, I like his sentence. What I built is fundamentally a surveillance aesthetic built on public data. So a lot of it is about the visual and how you're accessing and integrating the data.
It's almost like what a world we live in, because we've got, Jesse saying the vibe coding and you saying the aesthetic. And then I was looking at the whole thing's skinned to look like a classified intelligence system. So in some ways it feels like the early days when people were like looking for the challenge and putting things together, but then it's made off of, very real open source things that people have worked on for a long time. And then on top of that, it's a very serious area of the geospatial community. So it's just a weird juxtaposition, but also pretty cool to see.
My favorite quote: between Gemini, Claude, and Codex specific versions, it's honestly wild what you can build right now. The really interesting thing there is that he's hitting across effectively 2 or 3 different AI models, and he's not wrong, but it's still, I think even now it impresses me what I can get these things to do.
Yeah. Just to drop you a few lines of code and you just put that together with this other set of code that you got from over here and just keep piling it together until you get the tool that you want. Now, if you want it to be secure, that's apparently a whole other issue whenever it comes to vibe coding. But
well, and really it's about knowing how to tell the computer very specifically what you want. And that's the tricky bit. That's what a lot of people don't realize about vibe coding. A lot of it is talking in algorithms, not, hey, I want a thing that does a thing that with the stuff that puts this over here, kind of vagaries like that, because it doesn't work. You've got to say, okay, now make it do this. Now make it do that. Now make it do the other thing. And it's fun in a weird way, but it's a little skill in its own right.
I think maybe the reason that I wanted to put this in for the news is that one of his most recent videos was during the whatever they're calling this stupidity in Iran. Whenever that happened, basically he went back and, or while he was doing it, while it was going on, let his agents focus on some of that. And so he put together a visualization, a timeline of essentially, everything from ship movements to plane movements to when the airspaces were opening and closing. And of course, since it's all based on a virtual globe, you can, watch these things as they're taking place and see the patterns that are happening in response to the attacks.
It's a pretty impressive little tool set. It does open up the mind, I think, to, well, what could I make it do?
Yeah, but isn't it also a little bit of the dream of the urban observatory, which I don't think has grown since, but I still use it for things. But, just this idea that we can see things live and know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, Sue's talked about.
Well, watchdogs, right, and their We Are data and their City OS, all of those things.
I thought you were going to say Mini Tokyo 3D.
What's that?
I thought you were going to say Mini Tokyo 3D.
Mini Tokyo 3D is another application. I think you're right, Barbara. With the technology we had in hand each time, this has sort of been envisioned by lots of people in different ways, right? We update to what we can do, and now we've got a new set of tools. And another comment from him, right, is WorldView is the first attempt to make the thesis visible. And that thesis is we're building AI that understands the physical world the way it understands text, right? So we keep adding each of these things into what is essentially, or even back to, Bill Gates's one-to-one digital Earth kind of representation. So, yeah.
So this is a whole topic, but
Yeah.
it does raise the issue of, do we understand the world the way we understand text as humans?
Well, that's the thing, right? That's why we have visual language models, large language models. In theory, we're building spatial language models.
Yeah,
or
but
spatial models. I don't know what that would be.
I'm not sure we understand it, and I don't have confidence that AI will understand. Well, let me put it this way: AI may be able to understand the Earth the way it understands language, but I'm not sure the way it understands language is quite what people think it is.
Well, we don't think of our concepts and discussions as tokens. We're not coming up with it. Okay, now that's not entirely true. Sometimes I'm coming with it word by word, but most of the time I'm coming in with most of a thought, not putting it together as I'm going.
But like I said, I don't want to go too far down that road because I think
Yeah,
that's a whole nother topic, but it's an interesting idea to think about,
Yeah, because it gets into, is it understanding the world the way that we understand it? But what they're drawing from is, that we don't really understand the world as much as we think we do, which is, why we're all in this.
But that's it for the news.
On to the web corner. Layers of the Past is an interactive tool that's been created by the New York City Botanical Garden and the Urban Conservation Team that allows you to access over 200 georeferenced historical maps of New York City. And it lets you explore the evolving geography, infrastructure, and neighborhoods over time. In many ways, it's a deep map that allows researchers, educators, and also people that are working on their genealogy to go in and understand the past and context today. And they're hoping that the historical cartography can inform contemporary understandings of New York City from different perspectives. And if you go in and use it, it's, pretty cool. It's, similar to what Boston has created when they have that spyglass view that overlays the different layers and information. And they're going to be releasing additional maps and features on a quarterly basis to build this up. So it's pretty cool to use and, move around and look at.
I'm liking this resurgence of these things. So, I'm thinking of the tools that David Rumsey built for davidrumsey.com, like all of his maps and stuff. But sometimes you want the targeted sort of thing, and a number of different of these types of projects related to New York City, like the old NYC photos and some other things that the New York Public Library did. These are great, and seeing the maps kind of overlaid. So, kind of a cool little tool.
I think in later years, more recently, the collection has been georeferenced as well. So you kind of get that capability, the David Rumsey collection.
Oh, yeah. No, they've done that for a while. Yeah.
But so you can bring it in and compare maps and those type of things. Okay, so this week's main topic is really kind of an extension of our news items, because it's really just the fact that this year at GeoWeek, there was a fairly substantial focus on the use of terrestrial mapping. And a lot of it's things like SLAM terrestrial LiDAR, just using all those pictures that we have from, the cars driving around and collecting pictures in urban areas and such. And so there's a lot of data out there, and we're creating more all the time, and we're creating new technologies to create and collect higher resolution local terrestrial data. And so I think it's just a question of, what are your thoughts? And I think this is going to be a really short one, especially given how long we talked about other newses. But what are your thoughts on where we're heading with terrestrial right now?
I think the biggest challenge, and ironically enough, I think we have a structure that was sort of philosophically designed to handle it. But the biggest challenge is that I don't want to call it quite a grassroots, but it's the best analogy, effort here, right? So people are working hyper local when they're doing this and creating data for their very specific purposes, and weaving this together into something a little more cohesive or more broadly based is really the challenge. More and more companies are doing things that allow for that, but I kind of feel like we're ending up with a few, I guess, walled gardens is the proper term to use, that it's hard to work across space outside of the hyper local. And that's when I think things get really exciting, when they bubble up. And I was thinking of the national map as sort of the philosophical prototype of what they were trying to do 20 something years ago, of getting data from all these local areas into a one big map that you can kind of drill down and do. It never really panned out for a whole lot of, in my opinion, it didn't pan out for a whole lot of organizational reasons, not necessarily but there are some technical reasons behind it. But I think this is a really exciting thing that I kind of feel like maybe this, terrestrial mapping, I kind of feel like this may end up being our location-based services thing. Like, 15 odd years later, we're saying that's about ready to break out. It's about ready to break out. I think any day now it could just reverberate if we can tackle this. How do you integrate this stuff usefully, meaningfully?
Well, and you also have that conversation. I think that whenever we're talking about terrestrial mapping, it gives you the idea of that side looking camera and those type of things that are on the ground, but it's equally the high resolution drone data, right? Because you're flying 100 feet, 200 feet. You're specifically using it to oftentimes capture buildings as they're being constructed, or site modification, those type of things that are very much terrestrial activities. You're looking at them repeatedly over time. And so it has the same kind of experience as the on the ground terrestrial mapping, but just low elevation aerial. So I think I would include that in there. And so, yeah, definitely whenever we're looking at things like Open Drone Map, no, wait, that's the software. Is it Open Aerial Map? That's the place that you can put drone images. I don't know. I can't remember right now. But yeah, there's a platform that allows you to do that.
Which I would argue is part of the problem, right? Is the fact that, what is the thing that has the thing that allows you to put this? There's all these different subsystems that are creating this complexity.
One of the quotes that I really liked from the CEO of Pix4D was, "We are focusing on turning hitting infrastructure and functional data," and they're using a lot of augmented reality. And I want to say it's about time, just not because no one was doing it, but just that infrastructure is so hard to capture and to work with, and it's so necessary. So anything that makes people's lives easier in order to see it and work with it, and they're talking about trenches and things like that, just is a really good use of the technology and where we are.
Well, I think this has been like the dilemma, right, that we've seen evolve. The overhead view, where our data capture and remote sensing and stuff like that has been gotten increasingly better, but very good, versus the ground, right? The map essentially comes out from you. It was an old quote from what is it, Michael Jones from Google, right? Where the one start of Street View and things like that was, "You are the map." But now you're talking about reconciling that in the data collection, and it was so expensive to do when there wasn't, and time consuming, right? So a lot of that expense is in labor of, surveying and those types of techniques on the ground. But being able to combine, like, you have your remote sensing from higher altitudes, you've got your remote sensing now drone based and other technologies like that. And then you have the ground layer where increasingly you have the technology to get what was all of that stuff that is essentially perpendicular to the ground. So not easy to capture its depth, right, in that third dimension. It can be done somewhat with remotely sensed data from the top view, but to really capture its nooks and crannies at the scale that we need it, right? So it's a question of scale. Now I think we're finally seeing the use case mesh with the technology and the speed at which the technology can now do it, right? To alleviate some of that bottleneck. And eventually, right, to have our hyperlocal things as people add the pieces, like Frank mentioned with the national map, to eventually sew in the pieces of the quilt so that we don't have these islands that are so far away from each other. As we do more and more, right, we can stitch that mosaic together at the highest scales in all three dimensions.
And it's not that I don't think the desire was there, because I've been in sessions where they were talking about similar technologies and uses, but like you said, it was always very time intensive, and also it was very expensive. And once people in a municipality or a company hear this is how many man hours it's going to take, and how long it's going to take, and how expensive it's going to be, they always backed off. even if it was going to be, very useful for what they were trying to do. And I think this is going to make it more likely, like you said, that, you sew those pieces of the quilt together and everyone benefits.
I think that is one issue that we're still facing is that, whether we're talking about SLAM, we're talking about LiDAR, whatever it is, whatever specific aspect of these technologies that we're talking about, short of structure for motion or Gaussian splats, where it's, just a traditional camera that you're using to do it with, it's really expensive. And as soon as, one of these technologies becomes a lot less expensive, talk to me. I will be out there the next day and getting our facilities folks to start using it, because they're still relying on GPS whenever we have a hole open with something in it. They're going out and GPSing it, or having me go out and do an aerial image of it if it's a large enough hole, so that we can, have it in there. So the next time somebody needs to build something there, we'll know where the pipes are. But it's a cost thing, right? We can't afford to have a $60,000 LiDAR device sitting around waiting for that next project.
Well, it's kind of like we've gone back around again, right? Because, you used to have the data pyramid that basically talked about, it was a normal looking pyramid, and you would have at the top the localities that were, producing things, really the private citizen, not the locality, was producing things. And it was sort of expand out to the sort of federal governmental level, were the ones producing most of the data. And then what happened when, location-based services and the cell phone and all that stuff took off, it flipped it. So now the people producing most of the data are private citizens that are just volunteer geographic information and people like that putting out stuff, and governments using the data, not producing the data quite as much. This is a gross generalization, but it's kind of what happened with that data pyramid. Now we kind of flip back, right? So that on the terrestrial side, it's the governments that are doing that. And there's a very definite divide between have and have nots. You're not going to see a very poor county that's putting out a lot of data at this scale and this level, because of just what you said, Jesse. It costs too much money to acquire the equipment, or to even hire a company who has acquired the equipment to come do it. And the use case is a lot harder to make when there are more fundamental structural problems that need to be dealt with, like education or water or whatever it is that these counties are struggling with. Whereas someplace like New York City or Boston or DC probably has better access to this type of technology if they want to. So it's kind of interesting that we're going back to see these sort of richer governmental scales being the main producers, because of the sheer cost of production is so high. But just like every other technology we've ever dealt with, everything is expensive until they figure out how to make it less expensive or inexpensive. A cell phone used to be, just for the rich, but now everyone's got one. So it's just takes time to make that evolution of the technology.
Yeah, and I think some of that will be, as I was kind of alluding to earlier, is that some of that line will be crossed when you see so much benefit in shrinking the time it takes, right? So the human labor time versus the initial outlay of the technology. And I think that's where we're approaching with some of this. And you can get a complete picture maybe with one time through that have multiple uses, right? Once that data is acquired.
Yeah, Sue, like, I don't know how much it costs, but Emesent GX1 has created an all-in-one SLAM LiDAR RTK 360 imagery scanner. But they're saying that it can reduce the time to survey a site by up to 95%, so that you can do in a single day, which you would have done in weeks worth of work. So, I mean, I don't know if that claim is, accurate, but even if it's an exaggeration, that's still really impressive. But then looking at it, it's like a futuristic looking survey tool when you see it, and you go, well, how much money is that going to cost to get just one?
And even if it is, there's a lot of managers will look at it and going, I'm paying this person to do this work, and giving them a more efficient tool. I still got to pay the salary and the overhead and the F&A and the, all that stuff, the health insurance that comes with it. So there's not a lot of incentive necessarily to not throw labor hours at a problem yet. Now, at some point that flips where it's cheap enough that you go, well, okay, wait a minute, this makes a lot more sense. But it has the flip side of it that you then tend to reduce labor, which has other issues that go beyond this technology. But I think what's going to end up happening is I think we're going to produce a whole heck of a lot of stuff. And there's another issue we haven't really talked about, which is interoperability, right? So every one of these projects are done for a specific purpose. They have a specific use case and a specific problem they're trying to address. And they're using this technology in a way that helps them solve the problem, hopefully successfully. But even then, we know with technology, a lot of times people throw technology at it and use it improperly. Either way, you end up with all these bits of data that, in theory, even if it's using the same, GX1 camera system that uses the same data formats, they're for different purposes and they don't necessarily mesh well together. So when you want somebody who can look at this downstream, like what we would like necessarily, it doesn't always work because getting these things that don't have harmony of purpose to integrate is such a nightmare. And that's something I think is going to be a real problem once we get the technology down that we can produce the data. It's going to make that even worse.
Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges is a lot of these look proprietary in data and in system and in technology, because we're still at the stage where everyone is trying to gain, their market share of this, which we've seen in the past with other stages in, geospatial technologies.
How does this tie into the broader category of reality capture that multiple companies, Autodesk, Esri, etc., are trying to highlight right now? My thought, of course, is that it is one and the same. It's about that. It's not quite to the point of trying to do a complete twin where we want to have real-time updates of sensors and things like that tying into it. But, it is still giving us these snapshots more readily than we may have had in the past.
I think it is on the basic assumption of more data, more better, right? Is that, okay, if we produce, I agree with you that it's essentially just making more data to try to hit a specific data category that isn't necessarily being filled. I'm not sure if the real time, which would be the dream, of course, but even now, just getting a one-to-one representation of everything everywhere at one time shot would be a miracle in its own right. And I think this is an attempt to get to that, even if you have to do time slices that update every in number of months or years or decades. It gets you somewhere. I think this is an attempt to do that, to make reality in a virtual sense.
Okay, so that was kind of it. Like I said, it was a thing that just was very prevalent in the at least white papers and press releases that came out of GeoWeek this year. And so it just seemed like an interesting thing to chat about for a moment.
I just want to postscript and say, even though I knocked out a bunch, I really want it. Give it to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of it, right? As soon as somebody can give me a price that I can take advantage of, or an open access, open source creation of the products that I can take the time, and that's where the biggest problem comes, take the time to put together myself, I'll be there. But we're not there yet. On to the events corner. As always, go to some events. We'll be in AAG, Sue and I, probably, maybe. I don't know. It's still iffy with it, only 2 weeks away with everything going on in the world. But we might be there, so if you see us, say hi.
However, if things calm down a little bit, June 3rd and 4th in London, you can check out GeoBusiness 2026.
State of the Map 2026 is taking place August 28th through 30th in Paris.
GeoWeek 2027 will be February 23rd through the 27th in Salt Lake City, Utah.
And this is a new location for them. Of course, they've been in Colorado for previous weeks, I believe, always. But now we're looking at Salt Lake City.
Not to talk smack about Utah, but I got to say 2 of those locations sound a little cooler than the other one.
I mean, if you want to go skiing, I guess, February in Salt Lake wouldn't be terrible, but
that's true.
Other
than the elevation But anyway, that's
Yeah, it still brings the same questions for me as Denver. Will you get snowed in? But that's just me. Of course, if you'd like us to add your event to the podcast, send us an email to podcast@veryspatial.com.
If you'd like to reach us individually, I can be reached at sue@veryspatial.com.
I'm Barb at VerySpatial.com.
You can reach me at frank@veryspatial.com.
I'm available at Kinda Spatial, and of course, you can find all of our contact information over at veryspatial.com/contacts.
As always,
We're the folks in Very Spatial.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Crop top, blue jeans, scrolling through my worth on a mini screen. What's real or make believe? Why do feelings keep chasing me on a road to nowhere? Sharing my tears with Bon Iver. If it's alright, then it's not fair. Wondering, does anybody care? All the ropes inside my head. Oh my God, save me from self-sabotage. Holding books I don't read, posted on the corner with a coffee, screaming, somebody notice me. Why you holding on so desperately? All the ropes inside my head. Oh my God, save me from self-sabotage. Free ride in the front seat, but I bought another ticket for the nosebleeds. Cause some things ain't cheap. Take the city out of me to the country where nothing's personal. Talk behind my back so comfortable. Keep it up or let it go. Will I find myself if I lose control?